Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're enjoying your lunch. We must move on, as they say. Now, the format of the afternoon, I'll be asking Dr. Mike Kelly and Senator David Johnston up to the stage. So I'll make a short presentation, then we'll take our seats there and have a more detailed, I guess you could call it a question and answer session. It'll be very interesting, I'm sure you'll find. First of all, Dr. Mike Kelly is the Minister for Defence Materiel. As I said, he joined the Army in 1987, has had extensive military experience, including a number of operational deployments, finishing his career at the rank of Colonel. He was first elected as a member for Eden Monaro in 2007. He was appointed more recently in 2011 as the Parliamentary Secretary for Defence, and in February this year he was appointed the Minister for Defence Materiel, and as of about 2 hours ago, if the Rudd government is re-elected, he'll be Minister for Defence. So congratulations on that announcement coming up. That's if you get re-elected, of course. We'll wait and see. All right, ladies and gentlemen, please make welcome the Minister for Defence Materiel, Dr. Mike Kelly.
Thank you for that, and ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to be here today with our distinguished parliamentary colleagues, honourable senators, Lisa representing the Premier and our captains of industry. It's great to be back working with the Defence Teaming Centre here in South Australia, and thank you, Jens, for sponsoring the event today. It's also been great working with you over these times of difficulty working through projects of concern. It's been a great experience, though, and really highlights how valuable that process is to the Australian Government, its procurement processes. Really, this is a great place to talk about these issues. South Australia has performed a leading role in demonstrating how state governments and industry can work together to position themselves well for the tremendous opportunities that exist in defence, industry and procurement. Certainly it's an interesting story to tell. Going back to 2007, the circumstances in which we came to government, we inherited 2 wars, one of which, of course, was totally unnecessary and cost the nation billions of dollars, not to mention the thousands of lives lost in Iraq. But beyond that, of course, there were a number of issues with projects that were on track at that time. Of course, famously, the Sea Sprite story of $1.4 billion for an airframe that we never got 1 second of flying time from, $40 million on landing craft that didn't fit any vessel that we had or were about to procure, issues to do with how the Manura and Canimbla were managed and the decisions that were made in that process. And of course, the faults in processes of under-resourcing sustainment, of not allowing for the issues and managing the issues of block obsolescence, the process of chasing capability tails, always put us in a position where it was very difficult to juggle and balance the problems of the Defence Capability Plan and come up with a balanced approach to priorities and the balanced force that we need. So I'm pleased to say there was some fantastic work done in remediation of those issues. The creation, of course, of the Projects of Concern process has been a tremendous one. It really enables us to focus carefully and get proper oversight both at the ministerial level and to pull together the stakeholders in the one venue and through the one process to resolve those issues, and it's been a tremendously rewarding experience for me to be involved in that. We had initially about 21 projects there that have now dwindled down to 6 that are progressing extremely well. Of course, along with this has been the delivery of fantastic capability, and in my quarter of a century of involvement with this Defence Force and with security policy, I have never seen a greater period of capability acquisition and capability improvement in this Defence Force. If you look at the progress in the 3 air warfare destroyers, the 2 landing helicopter docks, the largest vessels our Navy will ever have managed, the 46 MRH-90 helicopters, wonderful platforms coming along well now, the 22 attack Tiger helicopters, the 24 Seahawk Romeos, the 10 C-27J Spartans we'll be acquiring, the extra C-17s we've acquired, the CH-47 Foxtrot Chinook helicopters, 7 of those that will add to our tactical lift as well, the 7,500 military vehicles coming on stream now. I'm very pleased to see the signing of the contract yesterday with Rheinmetall for the heavy and medium trucks that they will be delivering, and of course creating 150 Australian jobs in the process. There are many other aspects that I could go through today, but suffice it to say that this is a very exciting time for the capability of this Defence Force as a leading-edge middle power in the world. Associated with that, though, has been the technology challenge, and we all know that an Australian Defence Force has to be out there on the qualitative edge as opposed to quantity. And being there means you have to accept technological challenges and where the risk is in acquiring highly technical, highly engineered platforms. We've obviously seen that in relation to the Joint Strike Fighter process, but we are in a good space with that process now, and it will be a superb platform of a true fifth-generation fighter. But along with navigating those technological challenges, in my current role I have seen the magnificent opportunity that has been presented to leverage the investment in these platforms for the benefit of Australian industry in general. And as I've spent my time out at the coalfaces of your businesses in particular, I have been thrilled by what is going on there. We are seeing the evolution of a culture within our business community that needed to happen in terms of the relationships among SMEs and primes, the way they work together and support each other, pick winners in terms of their niche roles, what they're good at, what they can contribute, how we can assist them to be more competitive, innovative and skilled. And also looking at the innovation that's going on in those workplaces has been extraordinary. And these opportunities can be leveraged across Australian manufacturing and industry in general, and we can see that starting to happen. So when I visit companies like Ferra, who've created world-leading technology in preheating and laser cutting, or if I look at the work going on in composites at Quickstep and also aerospace, where really a lot of the future of industry and manufacturing will be dictated, the composites area, very important. I see the fantastic progress that Marand is making in tooling and manufacturing processes. I go and see BAE's work on establishing a titanium processing facility in this state, which will be one of only 2 in the entire world. And as we see aircraft manufacturing moving more into these composite and titanium spaces, there will obviously be opportunities there to extend our industry involvement in a global supply chain in aircraft manufacture, I believe. And certainly we are going to aggressively pursue further work in the Joint Strike Fighter. There is potentially $7.5 billion that can be brought home to Australia in that space. In addition to that, of course, we need to make our industry competitive as part of global supply chains. That is really one of the key features of the international economy at this point in time. It's a lesson many of our manufacturing sectors also need to learn across other areas of industry. And we're seeing that really evolving too in relation to the participation of our companies in that effort, and we have invested heavily to assist that process. And that is part of a broader story of the support we are providing to Australian industry, which is now funded to the tune of about $776 million. Within that package, we have recalibrated, revamped the SARDI, the Skills for Australian Defence Industry program, to the tune of $67 million and reoriented how it operates. We have put $120 million towards the Priority Industry Capability Development Fund, $120 million towards the Defence Innovation Realisation Fund, much support going into the Defence Materials Technology Centre, and of course a big investment of around about $67 million in assisting with the global supply chain. And we've seen about $550 million worth of contracts come home to Australia through that effort, with 90% of that value going to Australian SMEs. So that's a great success story. In addition to that, of course, is making sure we can bring back as many marketing opportunities in that international economy through the development of our capacity here. We have established the Australian Military Sales Office. It has been in operation for a year now, and it's doing great work. We've invested quite a bit of money to facilitate its efforts in establishing Australian presence at trade shows. It has 3 particular functions of building government-to-government relationships in contracting, but also Australian company-to-government relationships, and in the disposal of surplus Australian defence material. Through that process, we've already in this first year generated $35 million worth of sales. So this is a tremendous success story which we intend to build on. And I see great potential for leveraging further work in this magnificent maritime construction program as well that we are driving forward. Something like 40 vessels over these next 2 decades. Magnificent capacity that has grown here in South Australia, but as exists in other states as well. Just been in Tasmania recently, and you can see the tremendous design and capacity in some of the enterprises down there, like Taylor Brothers working on our air warfare destroyer, INCAT and others, that can contribute to this massive effort that we are undertaking and that we are funding. But I see more broadly the potential to leverage that into the ability to grow our shipbuilding industry, to even market vessels into the region in this dynamic Asia-Pacific economy that we all would like to become a part of and to exploit. And certainly we've seen a lot of primes recognising that as well and coming and setting up home here in Australia, like Northrop Grumman Australia, Elbit Australia. This is, I think, a good thing and a positive thing, and building those relationships between those primes and SMEs is something that I would like to particularly focus on, as they also assist in skilling our people and use Australia as a platform to get into the Asia-Pacific markets. So this is our objective, this is our vision, and it is becoming a reality. We do know, of course, that under-resourcing of maintenance and sustainment of platforms like the Collins has presented problems, and there have been skilling and capacity problems created by the approach to shipbuilding in the past. I think the timeline that we have set for shipbuilding will largely address that in the longer term, but in the shorter term we are aware of particular gaps that may occur, which we are working to fill. We have taken the first step, of course, in relation to reallocation of blocks for the AWDs to BAE, to spread that work, but also, of course, we have announced in the context of the White Paper and the Future Submarine Industry Skills Plan that we will bring forward the acquisition and the solution to our AOR, our replenishment ship platforms. We'll also bring forward our patrol boat construction plan, and we will consider bringing forward our future frigate program. So there is a great deal to be optimistic about, a great deal of opportunity out there. And we will also look to continue our investment in your capacity to deliver that. I know as I travel around and visit your businesses, many of you have taken advantage of a number of these programs, particularly the skilling programs, and I look forward to working with you further on getting your input into the defence industry policy processes. And very soon now you'll see the Defence Capability Plan and policy statement, industry policy statement, that will complete the suite of products that we have created in terms of the White Paper, the Future Submarines Industry Skills Plan, and of course the detail that is available in the budget. I would hope that we could continue a bipartisan approach to these issues, and I'm pleased to see that the Coalition have indicated that they have a bipartisan approach in relation to the defence budget. That is good to see. I would like to request and plea for the elimination of intemperate comments in the context of this election, that we don't see a flow over from other areas of policy into defence. That's what I think the nation and the Defence Force expects. And I particularly draw attention to comments made in relation to the Collins. And I have to say, David, in relation to your recent speech at the Lowy Institute, where you concluded by saying that the defence of Australia would best be served by purchasing boxes of white flags, I don't think that is an appropriate comment, and I would invite you today to perhaps withdraw that comment. So thank you for having me here today, and I look forward to the debate.
Thank you very much, Minister. Well, Senator Johnston can come up on stage and say whatever he likes, really. Shadow Minister for Defence, after completing a Bachelor of Laws, he began his legal career in the mining hub of Australia in Kalgoorlie. Moving forward to 2007, was appointed by the Prime Minister John Howard as Minister for Justice and Customs, and in September 2008 was appointed to serve as the Shadow Minister for Defence. Please make welcome Senator David Johnston.
Thank you very much for that. Jens, can I thank you and Australian Aerospace for the work you do and the 800 people you employ up in Brisbane. Aerospace acquisitions for Australia are very, very important. I actually think the footprint that you provide, the jobs in Brisbane you provide, is a great example to the rest of industry in Australia. May I thank the teaming centre, Chris, to you and all of your team. Thank you for the invitation. Can I acknowledge Steve Marshall and Martin Hamilton-Smith and David Fawcett and say, Steve, a delight to have you at my table as always. Enjoy your company greatly. I want to say to Mike, congratulations on Kevin's statement this morning just before we got here. I saw that. Win, lose or draw, I'd like to hope we can work together. You know, in defence, we've had some problematic issues in terms of briefings over the last 5 years. You know, I've asked for briefings and often I don't even get a response. Anything that we, and when I say we, the defence team and the opposition is all with you today. My junior ministers with respect to personnel, Russell Stranger and I are here, this is us. This is defence in the coalition. Now, we ask for briefings and we very, very rarely get them. So when we're talking about very highly complex aerospace platforms, submarines, surface ships, internationally renowned systems, command and control combat systems and things like that, the only source of information we have really is what industry tells us. In 2009 we were given a white paper by this Rudd-Gillard government. It promised 3% real growth, indexed at 2.5% with a strategic reform program promising $20 billion worth of savings over 10 years to put back into capability. Not one red cent was put on the table in support of that plan. Now, can I tell you, Gorgon is 40 trillion cubic feet of gas. It'll keep 1 million people in energy for 800 years. Wheatstone next door is 36 trillion cubic feet. Browse is 3 times bigger than Gorgon. Coal seam gas in New South Wales and Queensland is bigger than that, all put together. China, South Korea, Japan, Taiwan are all utterly dependent on LNG from Australia. Between Geraldton and Darwin, there is not one defence asset. There is $500 billion worth of investment on the northwest shelf of our country in minerals and LNG and oil and gas, and there is nothing to protect it. We are borrowing a replenishment ship from Spain. We sent HMAS Success to Singapore to be reskinned to comply with the International Convention. The alignment of the shaft on Success is out of whack. The ballasting has been bad. We said this in estimates. $210 million later, the ship is still tied up in Sydney. But when it goes out, if it ever does out of the heads, we've observed from people who tell us it has a beautiful little hip wobble as it goes sailing around the ocean. So we've spent $10 million saying to the Spanish Armada, will you come to the Pacific and provide us with the Cantabria so that we can replenish our ships at sea? So there we are, rescuing 40,000 people a year on the northwest frontier with ships that have to go back to port to refuel. There we are with an air combat capability that we committed to a long time ago. When we promised to purchase 14 this year, we've purchased 2. And so the story goes on. Manoora and Kanimbla. Rust apparently disables ships virtually overnight because no one has the audacity to actually get on board and have a look and say, what is the certification and seaworthiness of this vessel? Now, when we have a 2013 white paper that indicates that the 2009 white paper had the shortest shelf life in our history, we have Chapter 7, Defence, Funding and Budget. 1.5 pages with not one single dollar figure. Now, what are we going to do about that? When you see our DCP, if we get the privilege and honour of being elected to government, you will see a time frame and schedules. You will see what the mining industry taught me many years ago is a bankable document. Industry will have something it can take to its shareholders, its board and its financiers and say, this is the plan. There will be a tender released on this date. And may I say, a 5,000-page tender is not what you'll be getting. It will not cost you $2 million just to participate. Now, this is a space where Canberra treats industry and profit as something worthy of derision, notwithstanding that that profit pays their salaries. I have a parade of people in front of my office almost daily that says, you know, I've tendered for this project, I didn't get it, I know my product's really good, they won't even entertain a revision of why I missed out on the job. Now, defence is really, really important to Australia. For the reasons that I've set out, we have a responsibility in Canberra to provide the security for those countries up in East Asia particularly, on energy. The Parcel Islands, the Senkakus, the Spratlys, the Scarborough Shoals are all about resources. We've had plenty of warning to get our act together, and yet we have refused to. There is nothing in the pipeline. The vehicles that Mike has talked about are great, and I welcome them. The aerospace assets that have been purchased, I welcome them. But Navy is the key to Australia's future security. What is in the pipeline for Navy? The air warfare destroyers are a John Howard project. The LHDs are a John Howard project. The helicopters to go onto them are a John Howard project. What is in the DCP that is going to see us into the next decade and beyond? Where is the money coming from? My boss has said there will be no further cuts to defence. When this government came to power, it had $20 billion in the bank. It's now got more than $200 billion in debt. $200 million a day we're selling bonds for, borrowing largely from China. We have a massive responsibility to continue to supply minerals, coal and energy into East Asia particularly. And Canberra has a responsibility, getting the royalties as it does, to provide a viable, functional, proper defence force through its Navy of those assets. The reason we have had 45,000 people on 750 boats in the last 4 years is because our 14 Armidale-class patrol boats, popped out at $600 million, are working at 3 times their operational intensity. And they're burnt out. And there's talk by the government that we need new patrol boats. Where is the plan for that? There is talk that we need 2 new replenishment ships. Where is the plan for that? There is talk that we need to completely SLEP, Submarine Life Extension Program, our Collins class. Where is the costed plan for that? Submarines are really crucial to Australia. Really crucial. They're our best deterrent asset. Our very best asset. We need to fund them. We need to have a proper costed plan. You will see that in a new white paper from a new Abbott government. You will see a DCP that you can bet on. You will see a minister, if it's me, that rings up after a hull has been cut on a Collins-class submarine to see how the cut went. You will see me bring submariners into the space. You'll see me train and assist Navy to get the right people into the jobs so that our LHDs are functional. So that when we have a massive humanitarian disaster, as we're very likely to in Papua New Guinea, we can deploy those vessels properly and quickly. Look, in closing, can I say, my objective in terms of bipartisanship is this. When I go to Afghanistan or wherever, if I'm the minister, I will take the opposition spokesperson with me. I have been prohibited from going to Afghanistan. When someone asks for a briefing, I will allow the briefing with as many advisors as the opposition would require. I had to go through a briefing today because the department in question would not allow my advisor in. There's just 2 of us. But the government says, no, you can come in, but he can't. You want to talk about bipartisanship, you will see it under an Abbott government. You'll see us deal equitably with Indonesia. But we will not bow to Indonesia. We will not take a backward step on our sovereignty. We will not lumber one of the poorest countries in the world with 50,000 people. And we certainly won't tell you that, the next boat that arrives is going to Manus or Nauru when there's nowhere to put them. Now, defence is really crucial. We are earnest in this. I'm hoping that you're detecting a high level of sincerity in what we are talking about in defence. We don't inject defence into this border protection fiasco up there at the moment because that would be the wrong thing to do. But defence for us in the coalition is really, really important. And Tony and I have agreed, firstly, no further cuts. And we will aim to have that 3% growth that we agreed to back in 2009 as soon as we can steady the ship. And the ship needs a lot of steadying. Thank you very much, Chris.
Well, thank you very much for that, David. Perhaps it's best I do sit between you after all. Now, from the outset, I think we're all here looking for, but perhaps not expecting, some genuine commitment to the future, and with the federal election not too far away. But Mike, obviously for people here who are very interested in TechPort and the Air Warfare Destroyer program, and we hear about the Valley of Death, I think it was coined in this state from 2016. The valley starts till 2020. What are you going to do about that? Because would you disagree that we have the potential of losing a lot of business, a lot of businesses and a skilled workforce in that time?
Certainly it's a challenge, and we know from our past experience under the Howard government of allowing this skills and capacity shortage to evolve, that it really cost the nation something like $100 million in lost capacity to provide these platforms. And the under-resourcing of sustainment was also a major problem. We're now committing, under the DMO's budget, 52% of that budget to sustainment, and there will be a lot of work involved in that sustainment effort. And so there's huge industry opportunities just in that area alone. And that will enable us also to get a more extended lifetime out of some of these platforms, and particularly the Collins. But we're actually facing, we had a mini Valley of Death, if you like to put it that way, in relation to BAE in Williamstown and the Air Warfare Destroyer project. The reallocation of blocks has addressed that. In terms of this other looming period that you're talking about, we are determined to fill that.
With what though?
By bringing forward the AOR replacement project, and also, of course, bringing forward the patrol boat plan as well. And you'll hear more about that in time as these matters are.
So that's a guarantee.
Yes.
So you're saying
that commitment was made in the Defence White Paper. That is how we will address it.
The Valley of Death we talk about,
yes,
and the loss of work. Are you giving a commitment that is that just a mirage? Is that a fallacy?
No, we will address that issue. There may be some initial period that we'll have to work with industry to manage through, but it won't be a long period. And certainly what I've seen in looking at how German industry works together with their primes and SMEs, they support each other very well in dealing with the normal peaks and troughs of defence work. And we've been encouraging industry also to diversify its efforts in the economy generally, and that's, I think, what a smart business needs to do these days.
But are these guys here doing that?
Yeah, they are. I've seen that happening. And but if you look at BAE, for example, BAE's got something like 35 projects with us worth over $6 billion. So, you know, there's a good slab of work there coming to BAE, for example, across the defence spectrum. So it's a question of managing this, but we will address that gap problem by bringing forward the AORs and the patrol boat program.
David, a lot of people in this room today, they want answers. There are plenty of businesses in South Australia, I'm not just saying in the defence industry, that are hurting and hurting badly. They might think we've had enough of labour. They might think, whether the general populace does. What would a coalition government do? We're talking, again, the skill exodus possibility from 2016. Can you give any counter guarantees to what Mike said?
Look, the Valley of Death in shipbuilding in Australia is about a plan for 4 air warfare destroyers. The government has brought forward 3. I'm told that there was the CDF and the Secretary signed off on the 4th. That solves the Valley of Death problem.
That's not true.
Now, the costing for that is a matter for government. Let's talk about Mike's plan for the replenishment ships. Are we going to compete them? Are we going to have a tender process, a first and second pass? That's 2 years. Then we make the determination as to which boat we're going to have. Are we going to build it offshore, in South Korea, or in Europe, or are we going to build it here? This is 4 to 5 years away. Now, can I tell you, we have been in estimates talking about success and its redundancy for 3 years. I know for a fact the Cantabrian file has been on the Minister's desk since May of last year. Now, the fact is this government has thrived upon delaying decisions, moving things to the right. Now, the fact is that when we send a frigate into the blue water, to refuel it, we now have to sail it back to Darwin, or back to Geraldton, or back to Stirling in Perth. This is because the government has refused to make a decision. Now, we've got about 600 jobs at Williamstown that aren't waiting to the end of next year, they're waiting till about March of next year. This government has to do something.
And we have.
Now, I have got a reasonably good costed plan for a fourth air warfare destroyer, but I haven't got the money for it that I can see because I'm not privileged to see where the money's going to come from.
Well, David, just jumping in, and I'll be doing a lot of jumping in the next 15 minutes or so, a fourth air warfare destroyer, we've heard a suggestion there was one signed off on. You're saying that's not correct. Where's the truth?
Absolutely
there
not
or
correct.
there?
CDF, and more importantly, a bloke by the name of Ray Griggs, who happens to be the Chief of Navy, advised us that that wasn't a platform that he desired, that his priority were these AORs. And certainly you have to put this too in the context of maintaining a balanced force within the Defence Capability Plan. And in order to achieve that, you have to make sure you do take a balanced approach across the three services. And of course, we've had to manage the air capability gap problem as well in relation to the JSF, which the Minister has navigated extremely well in terms of acquiring now these 12 Growler aircraft and not having to reach out to too many more platforms in terms of extension of the Super Hornet, which enables us to stick to a timeline with the JSF which is satisfactory and minimises risk to the taxpayer. So that balancing effort is very important for government, very important for the taxpayer. But in terms of the fourth air warfare destroyer, it wasn't sought by the Chief of Navy or the CDF.
So it's definitely not happening?
No, it isn't happening because it's not necessary. It's pretty stupid to fill a $100 million liability gap with a $4 billion platform that your Chief of Navy doesn't want. And let me say too that the problem that we are in with some of these platforms really stems from the under-resourcing of maintenance highlighted by the reviews that we have held by the Howard government. They were notorious for equipping platforms for but not with, and of not investing in proper sustainment platforms. Now we have remediated that, and it will enable us to develop a process going forward in maritime construction that will eliminate that situation in the future. So just let me finish by saying how that will work. We are now pursuing rolling build programs. So when we get into the future submarine, for example, there will be gaps between each keel where we will learn from keel to keel the lessons from the previous keel, where we'll incorporate developments and improvements in technology, retrofit where possible, push off older platforms where that's no longer possible. That rolling build program will avoid block obsolescence and will keep a steady pace of work in the industry in the future. We just have to get past this short-term hump. All
right, well, David, it sounds like a fourth air warfare destroyer is not budgeted for, not wanted. Do you want one? If you are Defence Minister in 6 weeks' time or less, will you say, well, the Navy's got it wrong, I know better than them? That's question number one. Number two, you have said you won't, under an Abbott government, won't reduce defence spending, and there is a built-in indexation increase. So that doesn't sound like there's much fat in the system for anything of great significance down at Techport that's not already there.
Well, let's get defence funding in some sort of context. This government has taken $25 billion out of the budget in the last 4 years. Now, the fact is that as a share of GDP, defence expenditure this year is running at 1.59%. The last time we were at 1.59% was 1938. That's what this government is delivering to us in terms of our overall share of output from Canberra, 1938 levels in defence. And we've got 2 LHDs at 28,000 tonnes. Dozens of helicopters, dozens of men on board. The only way we can take those into troubled waters is with air cover. Now, if you look at the way the submarines have been running in terms of 6 to get to, how does 3 to get to go? It doesn't work. Now, I think there's a lot of logic and common sense in this. However, you know, the smokes and mirrors of 5 years of this government saying that Howard under-resourced things. If you have a look at unit-ready days in the Collins-class submarine, you'll see they were perfect in 2007. And then you'll see them actually go into freefall. The underfunding is that $25 billion that's come out of the budget that no one in the government wants to acknowledge or talk about. Now, that's the real issue here. There are other priorities. There was $900 to all and sundry. There's $10 billion worth of asylum seeker care and attention. There's just massive blowouts. I mean, we just saw $60 billion on the NBN this morning on the front page. Now, you know, defence is not a priority for these guys. I just wish they'd be upfront about it.
All right. Can I just comment on the budget issue? It has to be addressed. Okay, so look at the last 7 years of the Howard government. They never went above 2%. Okay. Certainly, the average across our two governments has been around 1.8%. All right, so that's the truth of the story. Since 2008, January 2008, we've approved 150 projects worth $20 billion. We've budgeted for $113.1 billion across the forward estimates, which is above the $103.2 from the previous year's budget. We have given a 6-year budget funding forecast and guidance of $220 billion from there forward. The capabilities that have been forecast and are needed will be delivered. Certainly we have made savings, and the point that I would make is that, point to me, David, point to me $1 that you will put back into defence, or change you would make to a saving, or difference you have in our budgeting approach. All we've heard from you so far is that you will maintain the current rate of effort, the current budgetary approach. There is no difference between the parties with respect to the defence budget.
Well, the first thing I'd do is put money into the DCP. That is, I'd put dollar figures on the DCP and put schedules and timeframes. I'd review it on a quarterly basis so that industry had something it could bet on. When I did a chapter in a white paper, I would spell out the money. I'd actually engage Treasury and Finance so that we knew that everybody, whole of government, was on board.
So no new money.
We wouldn't put in a chapter that says defence, finance and budgeting that waffles on for a page and a half with not a dollar figure in it. We would tell you what we are going to spend on defence. We've said that the 2009 white paper had bipartisan support. We've said that is the matrix that we would adopt. 3% real growth indexed at 2.5. But let's just talk about what we've actually got in defence. We've got 23,000 public servants running 59,000 uniforms. Now, Korea has about 2,700 public servants running 600,000 soldiers. We've got 356 people in defence earning $275,000 or more plus car plus super. We had 9 DepSecs in defence in 2007. We now have 17. This organisation is, may I say, unsustainable in the present form. And I'm very interested that Mike hasn't mentioned any of this.
I'm happy to respond to it.
Gentlemen, can I just jump in here, because I think we might wait till Kevin Rudd calls the election this weekend and we get into an official campaign, because we have a little more specific matters to talk about than tit for tat. Let me put this to you, Minister. Defence contracts awarded to Australian-based companies by the federal government plummeted from 80% to 53% over the past 5 years. That represents a cumulative loss of $8 billion in economic activity for the Australian defence industry. At the same time, the percentage of contracts being placed directly with the US government has increased by 40% of the total contracting activity. So what is your plan to ensure Australian industry gets a greater rather than a declining share of the Defence Department's contracts?
Well,
that's what people here want to know.
And that portrayal isn't accurate. In fact, it doesn't capture the true story about our investment in Australian processes. We've got at least, it's certainly over 52% to 59% of Australian contracting for our effort, and much more work available through these sustainment processes that we're doing locally as well. At the same time as we're investing $776 million in building Australian industrial capacity to take an even greater and more active role. Now, currently today,
we're seeing around about 24,000 people employed in defence industry. Over the forward estimates, that's projected to increase to upwards of 29,000 people. So it is a great story. It's an exciting story, and I'm seeing those opportunities building out there. As I said, we're aggressively pursuing an extra $7.5 billion worth of work on the Joint Strike Fighter. We're also going to be aggressively lobbying the US government to ensure that Australia is one of the 3 international deep maintenance hubs for the Joint Strike Fighter. And you can see our industry, our companies are out there enabling us to do that because of the great work they're doing in innovation and efficiency. So it is a tremendous story to tell. It is a complete myth to claim that there is a decline here. There is not. And there is a huge workload coming up with 40 vessels over the next 20 years where there'll be massive opportunities as well.
But would you agree that if you outsource contracts to America or to anywhere else, to Indonesia, to Timbuktu, that's all right in times of peace, but in times of conflict, you expose yourself unnecessarily? Are we building a bit of a fortress mentality that, unfortunately, what we need is on the outside, not on the inside? We have certainly identified areas where we think we need to ensure domestic capability, priority industry capability, and we've invested heavily in that. You heard me mention $120 million into the Priority Industry Capability Development Fund and $120 into the the Defence Innovation Realisation Fund. So what we're seeing is our identification of key areas where we think strategic national capacity is important, and the maritime industry here is obviously one of those, but it's in other areas too in terms of anti-tampering, electronic warfare. I think the thing that the Coalition doesn't get, and many people need to understand, is that in the battle space of the future, obviously our number one asset will remain the skills and courage of our defence personnel, but we must dominate the electromagnetic spectrum in the future battle space, and we must also ensure that our platforms are thoroughly integrated and networked, and systems are integrated effectively, and that we have a seamless integrated network of systems from satellite to soldier. Network-centric warfare will also be a significant issue. So those are the things where we're also investing heavily, but these technological collaborations must often take place internationally. The key here too is to enable our companies to participate in integrating global supply chains, and you've heard the success that we've had in doing that and the funding we've put behind it. David, are we putting our eggs in the wrong basket? What would a coalition government do to change it if you think that is the case?
Well, look, it is a great story to tell, as Mike says, and that's just exactly what it is. It's a story. When you have defence planning, you have projects, you have schedule, and you have money. Now, everything Mike has talked about is a story.
It's happening.
We've just had a defence white paper with not a dollar in it. The Minister said that before the end of June, the Defence Capability Plan would be released. We haven't seen it. Now, what is the problem? I mean, we had an underspend of $900 million in 2011. The money was just handed back because, they couldn't get themselves organised. The Minister couldn't see his way clear. And then when he was confronted with a similar underspend last year, he went out and bought a C-17 for $250 million. Anyone can do that. We caught them trying to do DPCU in China. We've got Australian manufacturers at Wangaratta and in Bendigo, and they were going to go to China to manufacture this material. Now, can I tell you that this is a lot of smoke, with respect to Mike, a lot of smoke and mirrors, right? Defence industry knows, and particularly South Australian defence industry knows, that we are all in doing it really tough. DMO treats everybody very poorly. Their relationship with industry is very, very problematic. Now, it's all very well to hear a good story. Show us the money. Show us the dollars. Because everything that's happened to this point in time is a matter of trust. A 2009 white paper that promised $275 billion worth of expenditure and not 1 cent put on the table in support of that growth plan. Defence industry has been hemorrhaging, and South Australia, who has, to its great credit, invested enormous amounts in supplying Techport, the capital, the roads, the training, the investment, has been dudded.
So you're saying that's not a good investment?
I think it's a fabulous investment if you're prepared to have a proper plan. Now, you know, ASC was only until recently not even at the table on C-1000. Where else are you going to build a submarine? You're going to build a submarine in Australia, you're obviously going to talk to ASC, I would have thought. They've got 25 years' worth of experience in managing a very difficult problem in Collins.
Did you talk to them when you told them that Collins shouldn't be touched with a barge pole? It was a disaster.
Well, Collins has
submarines here
at
in
$1 billion a year. Collins has been a massive problem. Read the Coles report. I'm sure you have. If anybody reads it, you'll see that the benchmarks for our submarine are light years below the Germans, the Italians, even the Greeks.
Do you regret making the white flag comment? Now I remember that that was mentioned before. Did you make it, and in what context?
Well, Ross Babbage actually made the comment, and I quoted Ross Babbage's comment. Now, the fact is that when you take $25 billion out of a portfolio that is so important, we're conducting cyber warfare as we sit here today, which requires a lot of investment and training in young people particularly. To take $25 billion, which is a whole year's budget, out of defence means exponentially we are chasing our tail for at least 10 to 15 years in terms of refunding that problem.
Perhaps you didn't catch up with the news about the opening of the Chifley Centre with the Cyber Operations Centre, David. And I still am waiting to hear where your new dollars and what of the $25 billion that you would bring back. I haven't heard a single dollar reference.
Well, gentlemen, because we are very time constrained, we've got to wrap up in the next 2 minutes. I'll give each of you your best shot to sell this audience what you're going to do for them. Minister, I'll start with you.
Certainly. Well, I've talked to you today about real dollars, real programs, real facts. I mean, it's all here in the budget in terms of the allocation of funding. It's there. The DCP will set out prioritisation and scheduling. The fact is, 150 projects approved since January 2008, $20 billion committed to those. It's a tremendous success story. We have put in place the remediation that was so necessary and the plans for the future of the way our maritime industry will be conducted and our acquisition. And certainly DMO has been a good organisation in recent times in helping us deliver that, and there are further reforms that I want to make within DMO to continue to build a relationship with industry, including seconding personnel to your businesses and the like, and we've talked a lot about that. But it is an exciting future. I don't want to see the Abbott playbook translated over into this defence space. We've heard a lot of intemperate comments and hyperbole which are just not supported by the facts. I am absolutely proud of this government's record on security. We're determined to make that commitment ironclad in the future, and I'm here to guarantee to you that it will be ironclad and that your businesses will be part of that story. And I look forward to working with you to deliver the security and the capability that the men and women in our Australian Defence Force deserve and our nation needs. So thank you.
Mike, thank you. Senator, if you'd like to respond to that.
Well, to some extent, there's no better example of the difference between the coalition and the government than who responded to the teaming centre's request for answers. I wrote the answers on our answers. I wrote them personally. I sat down and went through them and wrote them out myself. I note the department wrote the answers for the government. These ministers are pretty disinterested, may I say, in the actual nuts and bolts of this portfolio. Now, we have worked in very adverse circumstances for a very long time, being kept in utter ignorance at the government's behest. Now, you know, I can rattle off letter after letter asking for briefings. You've only got to see us at estimates on issues, very expensive issues, submarines, the Joint Strike Fighter, the Growler. Now, how was the Growler paid for? I'm told it was an absorbed measure. $1.5 billion just absorbed. Which Peter was robbed to pay Paul for that? We're not told. Now, one thing we will guarantee that you will have is documentation with actual dollars in it. Schedules that have dates. Ministerial surveillance that will engage the department and say, why have we not issued this tender? Where is this project? How is it you give back $900 million and yet you've had 5,000 people fall off the back of the truck in defence industry? This is mismanagement on steroids, may I say. You know, not one single asset between Geraldton and Darwin And we've got billions, hundreds of billions of dollars worth of investment there. And we've got millions of people dependent upon that energy. Not one asset, because they're all up on the border, driving up and down, picking up people out of the water because of that mismanagement. We'll give you transparency, sincerity and honesty. Sounds pretty trite, but I think we could do with some.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to put your hands together again for Mike Kelly and David Johnston. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you again, gentlemen, and on behalf of the DTC, I'd like to once again thank the speakers and the sponsor, Australian Aerospace, VIPs and guests that contributed to making this lunch a lively debate and a success, I'm sure. I again invite Jens Gernemann to propose the vote of thanks. Thanks very much, Jens.
Thanks, Mike. Minister, Senator, ladies and gentlemen, life experience from economic theory and sport teaches us that competition is a good thing. And also we as the industry are being held to account and to be kept honest by competition. I suggested once when the debate was about the size of DMO, I don't see progress there. Why don't we cut it in half and have DMO 1 and DMO 2 competing for the best answers that we have... that we have honesty on the purchaser side increased to that extent, how we as industry are being held accountable. Competition today between the best opinions and of different concepts could have been witnessed by us, and I was very impressed about presenting different approaches. I can honestly say that Australian Aerospace as a company and me as a person have been supported by the two of you very, very well, and I personally wanted to thank you for that. In more generic terms, I think it's fair to assume that one of you will be minister very soon and the other one will be shadow defense minister very soon. And I must say, from what I learned today, what I saw, I feel very comfortable for Australia to have such two capable and credible men in that portfolio on both sides of the political spectrum. And I would like to ask everybody in the room to join me in thanking the Minister and the Senator for their personal but also for political well-being. And well done and all the best for you in the next weeks to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Jens. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up the lunch in the afternoon. The politicians, the state politicians, have gone to Parliament, and so must I. So happy travels, safe travels. We look forward to an announcement of sorts coming up, and then it's, I guess, up to the rest of us to decide. Thanks very much.
All in all, there's something to give.